Good afternoon, Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, and colleagues. Before I start, I'd like to show you a film which will put you in a different mode altogether, I hope. So I will stand back while they play that. Thank you.
Food. We all need it, but most of us take it for granted. A changing climate brings with it a destabilizing effect on food crop production. With a fast-growing global population reaching 8 billion by 2030 and 9 billion by 2050, the uncertainty of food supply will become even more dramatic. Today, we do have enough food to feed everyone on the planet, but it's not distributed evenly across the globe. With the pressure on food resources, we need to look at new solutions now. The Earth has an amazing diversity of edible plants, over 10,000 species, and yet we routinely eat only around 70 different varieties. And of those 70, just 5 form our main staple crops of rice, wheat, soy, corn and sorghum. This makes us extremely vulnerable in an uncertain future. We need to diversify and find alternatives to those food crops we've relied upon up to now. We need to produce locally and consume locally. We need to look to traditional knowledge about different sources of food. We need to think again about how to use energy more efficiently to cook our food. To make these vital changes and find these solutions, we need to bring people, their stories and data together. And Eye on Earth is part of the solution. Sharing is everything. Nature is everything. Sharing nature is everything.
Thank you. So I want to share with you a story this afternoon. On Thursday I'll be a bit more technical, but as the head of the European Environment Agency, one of the great pleasures I have is to visit many countries and to hear many stories. And I want to tell you a little bit about a story that I came across actually just last week when we were in Durban in the negotiations for climate change. You can see I'm actually holding it. I have a prop. It's always good to have a prop. The story of food is an ancient one. In fact, it's shaped our lives, it's evolved as humans have spread across the world. And in fact, today it forms part of the narrative, the three F's we would say, food, fuel, and financial security. A very powerful story, and one which I want to come back to, because in a way people get sucked into the idea that we have a food security problem. But let's look at the reality. Today, many of the world's poor use nearly a third of their income buying paraffin and kerosene to cook food. They spend many hours, mostly women and children, going out to gather fuel, wood, dung, which of course causes deforestation and loss of soil, but also opens them up to attack and many other things. When they take that home, they burn the fuel in very inefficient stoves, leading to, in some cases, fires and loss of life, and 2 million people being exposed to very poor air quality conditions. And in a sense, we have the source of emissions of greenhouse gases, black carbon, some of the causes of global warming. So why am I holding this? Well, one solution is the Wonderbag. Interesting name. But it's a great idea. It's a very, very simple idea, created by someone who's here, I hope, Sarah Collins. I think she came here with us. And the idea is, of course, based on a very traditional one. It's called the hay box. It's the same as when the Bushmen bury their food. And what does it mean? Well, it simply means that as a woman who spends many hours collecting fuel, instead you put your pot, having raised the temperature like with rice or even with cassava for half an hour, and then you put it in here for another 8 hours, which means you don't have to stand in front of the stove, you've got more productive time. And in the case of many households in Africa, which is where this can be found in South Africa, we can see already that it cuts down the emissions from those houses by 0.5 ton of carbon per year. It's part of a project which then feeds into the UN Framework Convention on climate change, so it has real data coming in. More importantly, imagine taking that and putting it next to slums, next to refugee camps, because what it does is it empowers people to take a very different view of their food, but it also gives employment to men and women. But there's another side to the story, as the film has shown, because one of the things that we see is that cooking, and because it's so expensive, has forced us into a world of a very limited number of species of varieties. And so this opens up the opportunity for us to work in a completely different way, a biodiverse world when it comes to creating cuisines and cooking, and in effect, taking that out into the world when we talk about food security for 9 billion people in the future. So the Wonderbag is a wonderful incarnation of a story, a traditional story, which brings together I would say, the very sympathetic way of dealing with greenhouse gas emissions, of dealing with poverty, but really addressing how we can use nature's abundance and biodiversity more efficiently. But how are we going to make use of this information? Well, you saw in the film at the very end something called Eye on Earth. It's come out of a partnership, a collaboration between my agency, the European Environment Agency, also with Esri and Microsoft, to create a non-proprietary global public service, something that we want essentially today to launch and to give away for all to use, that actually allows us to have a two-way conversation with citizens, for us to use their information, but also to listen to people, for governments to pay attention to what's happening locally, whether it's mobile devices or people simply using the way to give information in about where they are. And Eye on Earth, in a way, is a vision, I think, for this conference, because it's more than technology. It's really about people, and it's about how people will come together in completely new communities. So climate change is a very, very important community. We met in Durban, we came to some kind of an agreement. And then we have the biodiversity community that meets under their own banners. And then we have the meeting in Rio+20, where we'll have another grouping. And of course, what we have to do today to solve our problems is to bring those communities together in a simple way, which tells stories to each other and helps us find a way through into a future which is more sustainable. So participation is what we hope is part of the vision of Eye on Earth. And I think the summit itself is a very, very good testament of how that can work in effect and in reality. But at the end of the day, we need governments to actually be accountable and to use evidence to make policies that make sense of the world and at the same time can be transparently and well communicated to the rest of the world. So I hope that in launching Eye on Earth, having stories like Wonderbag embedded into it and meeting the entrepreneurs that are really making these kinds of solutions available, we can genuinely create innovative and new ideas to solve the problems that we have today. Ban Ki-moon, the Secretary General of the UN, says that we're at a crossroads, a major crossroads. In fact, Rio+20 is probably the most important meeting in the history of the UN. I would contend that Eye on Earth is a very important player at that moment, because not only will communities come together to discuss the situation in which we find ourselves, but I hope that they will bring diverse solutions and not just simply solutions that come from one community, but come from all of us together. So we offer this to you today as a global public service. It has many, many stories like this. I hope you'll explore it with us and go away at least with your idea that you can join us, come together, and actually play a part in solving the world's problems. Thank you very much. Thank you.